Welcome back. It's still Plus TV Africa, and we're still in the Nigeria Decide studios. Of course, we are discussing issues leading up to the 2019 polls, and we are looking at the issue of restructuring. Now, we know that restructuring has become the latest buzzword in the country. Politicians are throwing it around. We, the people, are throwing it around. It's stirred a lot of questions, and people are wondering why restructuring, why now? But the big question is, what is restructuring and what is the idea behind it? And we have in the studio to discuss with us, David.
Yes, we have Obi Ajegbo, legal practitioner. Thank you very much for still staying with us on Plus TV Africa, and Dr. Tuyi Mebawondu as well. It's been a pleasure to have you still here with us to discuss this big topic. Now, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar was the one who brought this whole buzz again about restructuring, and it has been given all sorts of different connotations and meanings. But really, what does restructuring mean to you, and what should it be ideally?
Yeah, honestly, I remember those days when some of us were active at the level of human rights activism, and NADECO, and JACON, CDHR. We looked at what the military people were doing to us that time. We felt that it's a country that's supposed to be a federation is being turned to a unitary system, okay? And that structured a lot of decisions you need to take at the periphery. So now we see a centralization of everything in such a way that even if a road needs to be constructed down at Farasime, or at around the journey, you still have to go back to Abuja and get those things. And it became worse when military people were handpicked and pushed to different areas as administrators or governors in different states. So again, the thing hung with us for quite a long time until we now transited to this democracy we are practicing now. And then we now reminded ourselves that, wait a minute, we're not unitary government, we are federal government. And as such, as you have some functioning at the level of the federal government, at the level of state and local government. But now, that was then what we were hinging our campaign on, so that we should really have a true federalism. Now, whether true federalism is what people mean by restructuring. And then later, it became clear that we needed a fiscal federalism. So whether that one is the restructuring they're talking about, but again, people use different terminology to define what they want. But yes, if we can practice true federalism or near true federalism, I guess the country will be better. This recent clamor and the use of terminology, different terminology for what is true federalism, I see it more as political discourse rather than actually, hitting at the germane issue, which is, of course, what sort of federalism do you... Federalism, there's no another definition for federalism. Once you run through federalism, this challenge of restructuring or no restructuring becomes actually out of place.
Obi Amaka, are they just political language or lingo?
Restructuring is the road through which you have to pass to get through federalism.
Expatiate.
You have to break the states, the country into regions, or states, or whatever, and everybody will be responsible for whatever they produce, whatever is on their soil. And then that is the road through. It is when you have done that I can now say you have true federalism.
So the Niger Delta group, which has said that, well, you have to do that along the 6 geopolitical zones, you would say they are somewhat right in their call?
Spot on. Because now there are a lot of mineral resources in different states of the Federation that are untapped. Because let's say I have coal in Enugu. Why should I sell the coal and government will tell me how to use my coal and go and share it?
Your state is left undeveloped.
And my state is left undeveloped. And restructuring brings governance to the people so that you know the thief that is stealing your money and not say it's everybody in Abuja, because everything now we are putting it on Abuja. Let's change the scenario. Let us put it on ourselves.
I'm just curious, as much as this sounds really interesting, the truth of the matter is, look at the NLC imbroglio. Look at the whole strike action. This is because they were clamoring for a pay rise, which is fine and good.
Yeah.
But the front and center of this situation is that not all states are able to pay that amount of money, whether we like it or not. The reality on ground is that every other state, like Lagos, Akwa Ibom, Rivers, might be comfortable. But there are also states that are way down the list.
Look at Borno State, for example.
When it comes to how much money they get from the federal government coffers, they can barely pay salaries. So again, if we're going to look back within, can all states really become viable?
When I had the privilege of looking at the map of Nigeria to see what we have, and believe you me, if all states goes back to, remember the time we had pyramid of granules and things like that?
Yeah.
And if all states go back to it, we will earn more than we're earning from oil. We have states where we have deposits of gold. We have states that still have untapped crude oil.
Even gas.
Yes. So this is a blessed nation, but only for us to tinker. But this tinkering has to happen for us to enjoy a state, a nation.
Yeah, I need to be very clear about what we're talking about, restructuring. I think what I am understanding from the lawyer here is that she's talking about fiscal federalism. Okay? Because we must be able to come to term when we use words. You're saying restructuring. Are you talking about fiscal federalism? You know, are you talking about how to get police into your state, or how to get set up your own military?
But we've also been toying with the issue of state police also.
Yeah, okay. Because now, if you're talking about fiscal federalism, what it means essentially is that now, first and foremost, federal government collects there's a centralized collection of revenue at the federal level. The federal now says that, okay, based on some reasons, Kano State take this, Lagos State take this, derivation take this, and the money goes round. At the same time, states also collect revenues. But what is interesting, and the anomaly in this is that there's still a third tier of governance. And the state is not bringing the money out and saying that local government, Ikeja, collect this, Ekpe, collect this. So because, again, we collected this revenue directly, collect this money and then use it for this purpose. As the federal government is doing for them, giving them money to execute projects, they should also be able to give local government money to drive projects.
But that's what the state governor would always tell you. The different state governors will say that, well, we are funding this and XYZ projects and the monies are reaching the local council development areas.
Now, anyway, I don't know the local government development area you are in. We can look around everywhere and understand the fact that there's the local government is an appendage, so to say, of the governor. The elections are not conducted appropriately. There's no audit appropriately. There's no accountability. So the local government is used to settle political friends. So now, if you're talking about restructuring, what are you restructuring? First and foremost, we must be able to determine whether the federal government we're running is the appropriate one for us to run. If we say federal, then it is federal. That means that you must give that leeway for local government and state to run their affair the way they should run it.
Now, one of the recommendations of the National Confab, which, you know, we know where it is right now, tucked away somewhere, was that local governments should be given autonomy. Local governments should have access to their monies and not necessarily share joint accounts with the states. But like you rightly said, state governments are still holding on to those monies. My question is there no legal redress of sorts that could get the local government to stand on its own? Because I've read through the Constitution, and surprisingly, some of the responsibilities that state governments are taking on are supposedly duties of a local government area, because they know their people a lot more than the states who are in the capital city.
That's what I was telling them, that everything about restructuring should not be borne by the politicians. For politicians, it's just rhetoric to get people's attention. But the real work about restructuring has to be carried out by the lawyers. The lawyers have to say, we want restructuring, let us do this. And to digress a bit, he said restructuring, total restructuring, fiscal restructuring. The only thing that will be kept will be the armed forces, because it will be very silly for Anambra State to have its own armed forces. The territorial, everything territorial will be handled by the federal. And before that is done, a percentage, if I mine coal, because you're federal, you're doing this, this is the percentage I have to give you. And the federal has to put somebody to make sure we give them the percentage for the quantities we go. But restructuring is a must.
Now, Tuyi, how do you think, if we should have restructuring successfully achieved in Nigeria today, or you call it fiscal federalism, how do you think the Treasury single account will also go on, well, in terms of successful input of funds there and making sure that we don't have the leakages that still persist today?
Again, let me just clarify this. Why are we asking for restructuring now? We felt that the federation is not working. Why is the federation not working? Have we really sat down and sincerely looked and dissect reasons why the federation is not working? Could there be a place, because again, there are countries that run unitary system and they're doing very well, okay? There are those ones that are running federation, they're not doing well also. Of course, you know that Britain is a unitary system of government, they're doing very well. And you can always appreciate the fact that even Venezuela is a federation and is having problem. The key thing we should be addressing our minds to is that, why is our federation not working? Is it a human thing or a system thing? If it's a system thing, how do we address the system thing? Because for me, if you're talking about restructuring and you restructure inefficiency, I will clearly give an example, for instance. Okay, I'm quite close at the Southwest, for instance, and you now restructure and give Southwest, you know, to some characters, you know, and then they now hold it, and then you see all these things happening. How do you now, which power do you now have to grab the thing from them? The balancing equation in the federation is the fact that there is a superintending federal system that can come and tell you that this thing is not happening. But until we get our mindset, until we get the different groups to look at it and say that, listen, this is how we provide check against whatever is happening in any state, we are not going to get anywhere. We cannot restructure inefficiency. Now, coming back to your issue of Treasury single actor, the simple thing is that for somebody like me, TSA is an anomaly. You get my point. Honestly.
Why do you think so?
No, because again, we've seen TSA coming in. We've seen what they call zero budgeting, ZBB, zero-based budgeting. Okay? Now, you cannot use that kind of instrument, for instance, to budget for health system. And the key thing we're looking at to change any nation is the health, is education. Those are very key, you know, and then, of course, you know, agriculture and feeding. So now you cannot use ZBB to budget for health, for instance. And then the TSA, what it does is that it takes all the money away from you.
Pulls it,
and then the health thing is a thing that needs money, you know, that you cannot...
But could it have been something that was tossed off in the interim because we were trying to mop up funds that were spread all about because we're trying to fight corruption, and corruption in this case is, of course, money is going into different pockets, you know, unaudited.
Yeah, you see, corruption is driven by greed and fear. Two things drive corruption, okay? Because, you see, like my son was asking me, supposing suddenly, you know, somebody loses the house he's staying in. How is that? What's the assurance that he will get another house, you know? Let's say the next time. Because at the end of the day, everybody is afraid that, should I lose this job? Should I lose this position? How do I now get along? Now, what government does is to reassure that I don't care. Even if you don't have a job, you have means of living. Even if you get old, you can be taken care of. You know, people will now wonder, why do you have, even if you don't have money, your children can go to school. They can take money from here and get their health services. They can take money from here and go to school. If you reassure those things, people that are looking for, you know, more bid acquisition to grab all the things, I mean, that one would come down a bit, you know. If you have housing, you know, and it comes down to the issue of minimum wage that you mentioned earlier. Now, we see a lot of poverty of thought in terms of these labor union people. What do we spend money on? We spend money on housing, on our health, on education. What that means is that provide housing. If you work for 5 years, you are entitled to 2-bedroom flat. If you work for 3 years, then you have your health insurance. If you work for 6 years, then you have this insurance to take care of the schooling of your children, 3 of them, people will know that what they are the money they want to get, the increase they want to get, the gap is already filled. They want to put in more effort at work, and then you see stability in the civil service.
Let me come to you, Barrister. There was a saying that a lot of people, talked about restructuring, like the Emir Sanusi. He talked about the fact that, I'd like to say exactly what he said. He said that the reason why we're all calling for restructuring now is because we're running away from our problems and creating a diversion. He also went on to say that this call for restructuring is glorifying the First Republic. And in 1963, and also glorifying the 1963 Constitution, he said, if it was so good then, why did we have a coup?
Exactly.
He's asking, so if it didn't work then, why do we think it's going to work now? Have we come of age? What is new about it?
First of all, like he said, what is wrong with federalism? What is wrong with the federalism we are doing now? What I feel is wrong is when people get into there, they forget the principle of fair play. They become clansmen. Let me grab for my clan. Let me do this for my clan. It becomes a clan man. Jonathan time, it was the South and the Igbos that were reigning there mostly. Obasanjo is the one that I would say was
similarly
even,
fair.
Was similarly fair. That I thing has to, even when we restructure and it comes to region, that I thing will still be there. But now it's come to a region place. You know that this is where I come from. If I do this too much, these people may waylay me, they may wound me, they may kill me. So that may put fear. That's what we are leveraging on. That at least let somebody know that this coal, if we export this coal, 80% of it, and then this is what we're going to do with it. That's what we want. And I do agree with this emir to a certain extent. But which way Nigeria? We cannot continue like this with IPOB, with the Niger Delta people, and with Boko Haram. We cannot continue like this.
Now, Dr. Tuyi, in the article plan of former Vice President Atiku Abubakar and the presidential candidate of the PDP, he was silent about restructuring in his article plan. Are you surprised at that?
I am not a political person. I won't be surprised.
No, as a public analyst, what's your
I won't be
opinion?
surprised because you sit down sincerely and look at it. What is workability of this restructuring? You have to define it clearly. We cannot be defining in nebulous terms, restructuring. We have to define, and then we cannot, sustain a nation based on fear that if I don't perform, that somebody can bring stone and come and hit me, or can be pursuing me all around the place. We must stay, organize the nation based on structure, based on order, based on system that can work. Now, let's give an example of this little insight into structuring. Now, during the beginning of the regime of this government, there was shortage of fund. Paris Fund was released. People were owing teachers, even civil servants, months, 14 months, 10 months, 12 months of salaries. At the end of the day, the Paris Fund was released to help them. Some still had the money and were owing. So the question is this: is the federal government that caused them not to pay those people? So you need to look at the credibility of the person running the state and local government.
Okay.
If you restructure inefficiency, you end up with those kind of things.
All right.
There's nothing that's going to change.
We don't have so much time, but I have a question for you, Barrister, and then the same goes for you before we wrap up. Some people have said, for us to even start thinking of restructuring, maybe we need to restructure our minds. Maybe we need to restructure our character and our attitude before the main restructuring happens in Nigeria. What's your take on it?
We definitely need a mindset change in Nigeria. We need to know that if we occupy a position, we are there to do our job, not to be paid to do the job, or not to be encouraged to do the job. We have to get rid of me, and put a nation first. When we put the nation first, then things will start working.
Again, it can't be overemphasized that we honestly need to look inward. Because if you are looking at a nation, you are looking at minimum of 5 levels of intervention that's supposed to change the nation. At the baseline is the traditional institutions. If you don't have people at the traditional settings that can really orient people properly, then you have problems in terms of what should be values, what should happen, what shouldn't happen. Then you look at the spiritual institutions. We've seen traditional herbalists or whatever. We've seen churches, we've seen mosques. But what we are seeing now, we're seeing pastor entrepreneurs, we're seeing political imams. So those things, those are feeding into our psyche. Then the business environment. If you are not connected to government or connected to any power, you are not doing any business. You know, we must be able to see business that tap from our universities and use it to drive the business and then give back to the university. And then be able to birth innovation. The fourth thing is our university or intellectual system. Every problem we are encountering, for instance, should actually, you know, be a solution crafted from our university and research institutions, whether Boko Haram, whether girl-child marriage, whether how to deal with corruption. These are research that should come from the university. And the final thing is the political. You know, again, because when all these things are working, it serves as a check. They serve as a check for the political class who knows that somebody will bring out details of how to fight him. I remember those days we were students. We go on the street and chase governments out of power. But again, those things are not happening because all those 5 fingers the country is resting on are totally destroyed. It's a long walk.
And then in wrapping up now, are you expecting that all of these issues that you've raised will be touched on come the presidential debate as well?
Listen, presidential debates don't matter. You see, wait
it's
now.
Just talk.
Let's say it's just talk show.
Okay.
You know why? I will be quick. You know why? First and foremost, Nigerians, how many of them have access to power? Maybe less than 2 million people have access to power. How many hours do they get that power? You know, maybe 3-4 hours a day. How many of them speak English? I mean, because
no, why I say this is because at the end of the day, we always hear this issue of cabal running the system, and then that's why the power is always concentrated.
David, you can only talk in a country where there are ideologies. There are no, who are the independent in Nigeria?
Okay.
My sister here has who she's going to vote for. I have who I may likely vote for. What are you coming to tell me? So Nigeria is not right for those kind of things. Even if you debate in pidgin, maybe it's going to be better. Maybe if you organize, why are you telling me English? Oh, you understand? Maybe it's going to be better. All these things are just galleries.
Well, we want to appreciate you for being here on the show this evening. Thank you very much, Barrister Obi Ajegbo, legal practitioner. Thank you so much for coming. And of course, Dr. Tuyi Mebawondu, thank you very much. He's a public affairs analyst. Always lovely to have you.
Thank you, Marianne.
All right, this is where we say our goodbyes, David. It's
yes,
been an
and the
interesting
cookie
night.
crumbles here.
Oh, no.
Sadly, I wish the conversations would actually continue a little bit more, but remember that the conversations continue tomorrow at 6 p.m. prompt at Plus TV Africa. Our election studios will be open by that time tomorrow. Nigeria Decides 2019. I'm David Alabi. Thanks for watching.
And I am Marianne. I'll see you tomorrow.
Bye for now.